Late in life, Rita Hayworth stood before a mirror beside her daughter. She looked at the face next to hers and asked, "Who are you?" The star, known to millions, could not recognize her own child. It was not a scandal or vanity. It was Alzheimer's.
Miss Hayworth, this is the first time you've been with your children for quite a few weeks, isn't it? Are you very excited to see them again?
Of course I am. They arrived yesterday morning, and this morning they have never been in England, and this morning we took a tour for a few hours and went around and saw the Tower of London.
Quietly taking away names, places, and the story she had lived. That single question shows the truth of her life. A public idol, a private patient. The distance between adoration and suffering shaped every turn and ultimately led to a decline that many mistook for weakness.
Well, I don't know what you want me to say. I thought The Lady from Shanghai was a very good picture, and of course working with Orson was marvelous. You know, he's a fine actor, a fine director. He directed that.
Her path from trained child dancer to fading icon shows how ignorance of brain disease turns symptoms into blame. To remember her well, we must name the illness. Across these years runs one thread: a girl pushed onto the stage, a star crafted to sell, a woman who tried love 5 times, and an illness that took her voice before the world learned why. This is not about mourning a poster. It's about meeting the person who had to live inside it. Margarita Cansino was born in Brooklyn in 1918 into a family of dancers. Her father, Eduardo Cansino, was a Spanish flamenco performer who trained her as soon as she could stand. By 12, Margarita was on stage with him as one half of the Dancing Cansinos. Trouble began when Eduardo took his underage daughter to Tijuana, Mexico, to work in nightclubs beyond California law. They even posed as a married couple to sell the act.
She looked 10 years older, which of course is the impression they were trying to make. She was such a quiet, reserved girl and spent most of her free time sitting out on the front porch. And she almost looked frightened. Her eyes widened like a deer. Of course, she never smiled much anyway. She was quite a, I hate to say sad exactly, because she seemed happy enough when she was just sitting around with her brothers. But there was always an expression on her face of, what should I call it? Not wistfulness, I don't really know what to call it, almost sad.
During these tours, Eduardo engaged in inappropriate behavior that would haunt Margarita for the rest of her life. Her mother apparently suspected something was wrong and tried to protect her daughter by sharing her bed, but the damage was already done. Years later, Margarita told Orson Welles about her father's actions. The trauma left her eager to escape and with a profound difficulty trusting men. She would spend her entire life seeking male protectors who invariably became new sources of exploitation and control. Hollywood opened a door. In 1934, while dancing in a Tijuana club at 16, she was spotted by a Fox film scout. She signed on as Rita Cansino and was cast in minor exotic roles. When Fox dropped her, a businessman named Edward C. Judson stepped in and took charge. In 1937, at 18, Rita married Judson, who was more than twice her age. She saw a way out from her father. He saw a business. He launched a makeover to sell his young wife to American audiences. The changes were harsh. With Judson's push and Columbia's approval, Rita underwent painful electrolysis treatments to raise and reshape her naturally low hairline, which the studio considered too ethnic. She dyed her hair a deep red and took her mother's Irish surname, adding a Y, becoming Hayworth. Publicity cheered the all-American result. Behind the campaign, a young woman's identity was being cut away. The Spanish-American dancer from Brooklyn was reshaped to fit a narrow, idealized image. Judson steered her wardrobe, her public behavior, and her contracts. "I married for love, but he married for business," she later said, recalling 5 years in which he treated me as if I had neither a brain nor a soul. The makeover worked for Hollywood. Her roles grew through the late 1930s. The personal cost was steep. When she divorced Judson in 1942, she learned she was nearly broke. He had tied himself to her deals and drained her earnings. The pattern was set. The people who built her image put their interests first, and the rescues she sought became new traps. What began as a way out became a set of rules she could not write. The studio could alter her hairline and her name, and it could also change what parts of herself she felt safe showing. The audience saw ease. She felt the cost. That cost followed her into every room where she was expected to smile first and ask questions later. With a new name and look, Rita Hayworth rose fast in the early 1940s. Columbia Pictures, hungry for a breakout star, pushed her as their answer to the big studio's glamour queens. By 1940, her face filled magazines and lobby cards across the country. She stood out in Only Angels Have Wings and The Strawberry Blonde, holding her own with top stars. Years of dance training made her movements fluid and precise. Fred Astaire, who partnered with her in You'll Never Get Rich and You Were Never Lovelier,
but I don't mind it. That's
later called her his favorite partner. By mid-decade, she was a marquee name. Life magazine put her on its cover, and a 1941 pinup photo became a favorite among GIs. The defining role arrived with Gilda. As the magnetic woman opposite Glenn Ford, she performed the one-glove tease to Put the Blame on Mame and became the era's emblem of screen allure.
they once had a shooting.
The media soon labeled her the Love Goddess. The title sold tickets, but it narrowed her life. She felt the strain of being treated as a fantasy. Men go to bed with Gilda, but they wake up with me, she said, naming the gap between image and self. For the studio, the creation was a triumph. For Rita, it was a cage with applause. Publicists balanced her as both wholesome and sultry. Audiences embraced that mix because she made it look easy. Off-screen, holding that pose grew harder with each new demand. She remained the brand while trying to stay a person. Success brought a new pressure, to be the same vision every day, at every angle. A pinup can be printed by the thousands. A person can only be one woman at a time. That strain did not show on camera. It showed after the lights cooled and the next call sheet arrived. Rita married 5 times in just over 2 decades. Each union opened old wounds. Childhood harm made it difficult to find safe partners, and fame attracted men who saw a prize. After leaving Judson in 1942, she shocked Hollywood by marrying filmmaker Orson Welles in September 1943. He had seen her life cover and boasted he would marry her. They had a daughter named Rebecca in 1944. The marriage was strained. Welles was often gone, absorbed in work, and unfaithful to public affairs. Rita wanted steadiness and a home. He didn't want to be tied down, she said, recalling his claim that he never should have married. She felt forgotten even when she flew to join him. They divorced in 1947. He later praised her as a wonderful wife and an extraordinary girl, with no true enemies in Hollywood. Her third marriage looked like a fairy tale. In 1948, she met Prince Ali Khan while in Europe. He wooed her with grand gestures, even hiring a fortune teller to say they were meant to be. Defying her Columbia contract, she married him on the French Riviera in 1949. The press dubbed her Princess Rita. Rita tried desperately to fit into his aristocratic world, learning French and proper etiquette to be the perfect royal wife. However, the marriage quickly became a nightmare. Ali Khan's infidelities continued unabated, humiliating Rita in front of European high society. Travel brought robbery attempts and kidnapping threats that made her anxious and alone. She began to drink to cope. "I was never a drinker," she wrote. "I got a taste for everything and ended up drunk, a wreck." Their daughter, Princess Yasmin, was born in 1949. In 1951, amid a public affair with actress Joan Fontaine, Rita fled to the United States with both daughters. The divorce was final in 1953, followed by a bitter custody fight. In 1953, she began a whirlwind with singer Dick Haymes, who introduced himself while still married to someone else. His career was fading, and debts were heavy. He saw Rita as a partner and a lifeline. The relationship swung between fights and lavish public affection. He pushed her to use leverage with Columbia, even insisting that any settlement include a producer job for him. In August 1955, an argument at the Coconut Grove nightclub turned violent. He allegedly struck her in public. She left at once and filed for divorce for extreme cruelty. The marriage had lasted barely 2 years. Her fifth and last marriage was to producer James Hill in 1958. At first, he seemed supportive. Soon, he pressed her to accept roles she did not want and berated her when she resisted. Actor Charlton Heston later described a dinner where Hill hurled obscene abuse, leaving Rita in tears. She filed for divorce in 1961, citing mental cruelty. After this final divorce, Rita swore off marriage permanently.
There are people who can cope with the ups and rather mostly the downs in life, and she was really not strong enough to deal with the blow.
The pattern across all 5 relationships was tragically consistent. She searched desperately for love, security, and respect, but found exploitation instead. Her childhood trauma had damaged her ability to recognize healthy partnerships, while her fame attracted men who viewed her celebrity as something to be leveraged rather than a burden to be shared. By the late 1950s, small changes in Rita's behavior had begun to worry those nearby. During They Came to Cordura, her daughter Yasmin saw rising anxiety and sudden swings in mood. Routine tasks unsettled her. On sets, people whispered that she was difficult. She missed cues, forgot lines, and could flare over minor problems. Many blamed drink or stardom. In reality, Rita was experiencing the early symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, a degenerative brain condition that was virtually unknown to the public. It was rarely diagnosed, especially in someone just past 40. Medical understanding of dementia was limited, and there was tremendous stigma around any form of mental deterioration. Her last major film was The Wrath of God. Colleagues saw how hard it had become. At 54, she struggled with lines and needed to shoot one cue at a time. For those who recalled her mastering complex dances in single takes, the change was painful. After the film, she stepped away from acting. Almost no one understood. Senility was a word saved for the very old. The press leaned on myths about stars who could not handle pressure. Lapses in moods were blamed on character, not disease. Rita knew only that something was wrong. Without a name, fear fed distress. She kept her pain private, unwilling to show weakness in a business that punished it. Public outings grew rare. When she did appear, symptoms were misread as scandal. There was no handbook for what she faced. Without a precise diagnosis, even kind people reached for the wrong labels. She tried to work. The work stopped fitting. She tried to hide. The symptoms did not obey privacy. In the 1970s, the decline became a public issue. In January 1976, on a TWA flight to London, Rita grew disoriented and upset. Alcohol served on the plane likely worsened her symptoms. At Heathrow, staff escorted her from the aircraft as cameras flashed. Headlines were cruel. "Unwell star in airport riddle," one paper blared, framing it as a drunken scene. Photos showed a frail, bewildered woman. The story ran worldwide. The easy answer, booze, fits the gossip. Few asked about a medical cause that made alcohol far more dangerous for her. Pain became spectacle. The following year, the law stepped in. In 1977, a California court approved a conservatorship over her person and finances after doctors called her gravely disabled, citing severe alcoholism and possible mental illness. Tabloids shouted, "Rita Hayworth, alcoholic, mentally ill, gets guardian." The label stripped her of control. The one-time queen of Hollywood now needed permission to live her own life. The real illness still went unnamed. Commentators scolded her for self-destruction. Former colleagues kept their distance. Studios that had profited from her talent did not rally to help. Rita grew more isolated. Conservatorship put strangers in charge of her daily life, care, and finances. Privacy vanished. Choices became paperwork. The public watched a cautionary tale about fame, not a patient in need of care. The cruel twist was the truth. She was not choosing ruin. A disease was dismantling memory, judgment, and emotion. Drinking, when it happened, was a flawed way to cope with symptoms she could not explain. In that era, judgment felt easier than compassion. The woman who had given audiences decades of entertainment found herself abandoned when she needed help most. The answer came in 1980. Doctors in New York diagnosed early-onset Alzheimer's disease. Rita was 61, a name at last for the force that had taken her work, her steadiness, and her reputation. The diagnosis both explained and saddened. Years of confusion and blame now had a cause, but it came too late for her to find comfort in that truth. By then, the illness had advanced. Her daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, moved Rita into her New York building and went public with the diagnosis. That choice changed the conversation. For the first time, a major star was openly linked to Alzheimer's. The disease began to shift from a state of shame to one of medical understanding in the public mind. Rita became one of the first widely recognized faces associated with the illness. Many families had kept such a decline hidden. Yasmin used her mother's story to teach, to raise awareness, and to press for research. The image of a screen legend with dementia forced people to rethink easy ideas about aging and blame. The bitter fact is that Rita never knew the relief of being understood. As Yasmin said, her mother would never know vindication. By the time the world knew, Rita was beyond comprehension. Her last years were a long goodbye. Alzheimer's strips memory, language, and recognition. Yasmin sat with her, playing dance music and old films to spark small lights. Sometimes a song or a favorite movie drew a smile, and the question, "I know that movie, right?" Those sparks faded. Caregiving is a slow art. Yasmin learned the small rituals that made a day calmer. Soft music, dim lights, and a familiar face at the same hour. Wins were brief, a smile, a relaxed hand, but they mattered. They told her that presence still reached where words could not. One day, standing before a mirror, Rita looked at her daughter and asked, "Who are you?" A face known to millions could not place her own child. By the mid-1980s, she could no longer form clear sentences, feed herself, or engage in daily life. She needed full-time nursing. Much of the industry kept its distance. Her family stayed. On May 14, 1987, Rita Hayworth died at 68, nearly 40 years after Gilda made her a legend. Friends and fans said goodbye. The end was quiet. Death closed her life, but opened a movement. In the late 1980s, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan established the Rita Hayworth Gala, an annual event dedicated to raising funds for Alzheimer's research and care. Held in cities like New York and Chicago, the galas have raised tens of millions of dollars and kept attention on a disease once rarely named. The reach of her story went beyond money. It helped families speak openly. In 1985, President Ronald Reagan, a Hollywood contemporary, publicly praised her courage a few years before facing his own Alzheimer's. Stigma began to lift as people saw that a brain disease can strike anyone, no matter how famous or beautiful. Modern retrospectives now read her life with clearer eyes. They frame the early trauma, studio control, and misread illness in terms used today. Her clashes with Columbia head Harry Cohn and the careful manufacturing of her image show how the system shaped women's bodies, names, and futures. The fact that a Latina actress had to hide her heritage to reach superstardom reveals old biases that still echo. Film historians note how she walked a line between wholesomeness and sex appeal while being treated as a product. Her triumphs shone with the classic Hollywood style, and her pain revealed the cost of maintaining that shine. For many, she remains the picture of old Hollywood: red lips, long hair, and a brilliant smile. For others, she is the woman behind that poster, talented, wounded, and trying to live an everyday life inside a myth. Writers keep revisiting her terrifying sentimental life, making sure younger viewers hear the lessons. They stress that behind Gilda was a person who never found steady happiness and often paid for the attention the image drew. Critics have reread her last performances with compassion, seeing that reported difficult behavior could have been early Alzheimer's. That mercy was rare in her time. Today, her legacy has two strands. She is one of cinema's great stars, and she is a figure whose struggle helped millions understand a devastating disease. The American Film Institute lists her among the top 25 female screen legends. Her story encourages us to look beyond the surface and treat public figures as human beings. For audiences who revisit her films now, context sharpens the view. The artistry remains. So does the lesson about how a culture can misread pain until a name is finally said out loud. Remembering her means holding both truths at once. What should we carry after hearing Rita Hayworth's story? Start with this. Every glossy image is made by people with lights, lenses, and plans. But the person inside that frame goes home with feelings that do not fade when the set goes dark. When we talk about legends, we can choose care over gossip. We can ask better questions, and we can let kindness lead the way we remember them. If you rewatch her films, notice the small things, the timing of a turn, the breath before a line, the work hidden in ease. Share those moments with someone younger. Tell them the craft mattered, and so did the woman who learned it the hard way. Keep her name alive without the noise that once surrounded it. Most of us won't face cameras, but many of us will stand beside someone whose mind or memory changes. Patience helps. Listening helps. Giving people dignity costs nothing and means everything. Let the credits roll, and then take one quiet beat. Say her name and mean it. Hold room for the artist and the person. That is how we honor Rita Hayworth without turning her life into a headline again.